go ahead and get started as people are still in small numbers coming in from the waiting room. But good evening and welcome. And I am so excited by the size of tonight's audience. And thank you for giving us some of your time here on a Thursday evening. My name is Jason Eckert, and I am the Executive Director of Career Services. And welcome to this Aviate Path event entitled the Chicago-Based Job Search, Insights and Advice from UD Alumni. We know that Chicago is one of the most desirable destinations for our students and our alumni in terms of the job hunt. And we hope this workshop will offer some advice and some insights in terms of how you can get to Chicago if you're looking for an internship or even down the road a full-time job. We are very excited to have a panel of alumni who are going to be assisting us with the questions this evening. I invite all of you to consider asking questions during the workshop, and the best way to do that would be to type them into the chat. The hosts of the meeting, including myself, can see the chat, and we will certainly field your questions during the course of the hour. As we're getting started, let me remind you of Zoom meeting guidelines for PATH events. As a reminder, you must log in with your authenticated University of Dayton Zoom account to earn the PATH. Unless we ask you to unmute to ask a question, I would remind you to please keep your microphone on mute. However, to keep your camera turned on. And you must be logged in individually with your own account. In other words, groups cannot receive a PATH point for being in the same room together. And we do have an ACE as well as members of the career services and the alumni relations staff this evening, engaging your level of engagement. So please do keep your camera on and take part actively in the presentation. So as I mentioned earlier, we are joined by a, if I may say so, real rock star panel of alumni who are based in Chicago and have really good experience with the recruiting process. So we're joined this evening by Kristin Grimms from the UD class of 2006. Kristen is a recruiter with FTI Consulting. Angela Hill from the class of 1995, who is the Director of Recruitment and Selection at Northwestern Mutual. Greg Herr from the class of 2006, who is the Director of Talent and HR Transformation at Gallagher, and I love that title, Greg. And we're hoping to be joined in a little while by Craig Simmel from the class of 05. Craig is the head of global brands at Snap. Craig is traveling and trying to join us as soon as he possibly can. I'm also joined by my colleague from Alumni Relations, Anita Brothers, and Anita's going to be helping monitoring the chat this evening as well. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen so that you can see hopefully our alumni and not the slide presentation. And to get us started, and once again, please, we welcome your questions about networking, applying, and labor market insights related to the Chicagoland area. But to get us started, I'd like to ask each of our panelists, beginning with Angela, to introduce yourself and to share your background in terms of how you made that jump from the University of Dayton to a professional life in Chicago.
Thank you, Jason, for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here. I love UD and what it did for me. So thank you again for letting me be here. My journey at Dayton was, I was a communication management major with a minor in marketing and English. And at the time I had an opportunity to, that's what, when internships weren't so much required as they are today. But I had an opportunity to interview with a company right off of campus, NCR, which they then got bought out by AT&T. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to, gain professional experience as well as have an income while going to school at the same time. So that was not as common as it is today, but for me, that was a wonderful avenue for me to kind of get into that, because once I had that internship, and with AT&T purchasing NCR, you know, AT&T was everywhere in the country. And so I originally am from Cleveland, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. And when I was graduating, I started interviewing many different places, but AT&T was one of them. And I was able to interview with AT&T in Cleveland. It was Independence, Ohio, for sales position. So I was a sales manager there for about a year. And my fiance at the time, who also was a Dayton alumni, he is from Chicago and he's a year older than me. So when it came time, we got engaged and we were going to move to Chicago. I started interviewing in Chicago through AT&T. And so it was just a wonderful, because of that experience at Dayton, that just opened all the doors that led me here. And so I worked for AT&T and national markets and sales in the city for many, many years. And then, you know, once I had children, I was able to stay home with them, which I loved and cherished those years. And as my children got older and it was a good time for me to get back into the workforce, I ended up, I was a client of Northwestern Mutual, and our advisor had reached out to me and said, you know, I heard you're going back to work. Would you ever be interested in working for me? And one of the things that I would always encourage all of you is just to be open to any opportunity, because it was something that I never did before, because it was not anything in my major. It was financial services. And I thought the idea of learning something new really intrigued me. And so I took that leap, and I've been with Northwestern Mutual for over 7 years now. So that was my journey.
Thank you, Angela. Next up, we have Greg Herr.
Hello, thank you. So I had not a smooth path as Angela. So I grew up in the Dayton area, and then when I graduated, I didn't really have a job in Dayton, and I knew I wanted to come to Chicago. So I actually stayed at some fellow UD grads' apartment on their couch in Lincoln Park neighborhood until I found the first job I could take, which was probably one of the worst jobs I ever had, and found an apartment. And so I started out selling copiers in downtown Chicago, and then went to a startup, decided sales wasn't for me, went to go get my master's in industrial organizational psychology, and then started working at a healthcare company, got recruited by Deloitte Consulting, did human capital consulting for them for a few years. And then once we had our first child, needed to get off the road. So I've been at Gallagher for about 3 years now. So I work not so much on the external recruiting, but I manage a lot of the internal talent processes. So internal talent recruiting and development as part of my job at Gallagher. So like Angela said, be open to things you're not expecting. If you do get a job and it's not the first thing you want, think about what skills you can take from that job, and don't be afraid to ask people in the role of what you're doing, you know, about their job. You know, everybody in a company is happy to talk about what they do, and everybody's happy to get rid of the lower end stuff off their plate as extra work for an opportunity to learn. So thank you, Jason.
Great advice. Thank you, Greg. And we have next up, Kristin Grimms.
Hi, everyone. I graduated Dayton in 2006. I am from the Chicago area. So after graduation, I moved back to Chicago, moved back in with mom and dad, and you know, started my career search. I was a communication management grad, as mentioned, and I honestly wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So I got an internship, and then from there, I got my first job. And it took me quite a few years till I found recruiting, and basically till I found what I really wanted to do and what I enjoy doing. So so I would say the first job or two may not be exactly what you're looking for, but that's okay. You know, you'll get there eventually. So that's where I'm at now.
Thank you very much, Kristen. A few reminders for everyone in the meeting tonight. For our students, you do have to have your camera turned on to receive the path point, so just making that friendly reminder. We also would love to have this hour be led by student questions. So students and alumni who are our guests tonight, please by all means feel free to use that chat feature to ask questions of any of our alumni panelists, and we're happy to field those. My next question, networking is so important, and you've talked about that a little bit already. Maybe beginning with Greg this time. What advice do you have for students who are interested in networking with professionals in their fields in Chicago?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, LinkedIn is a great tool. You know, it can be a little Facebooky at sometimes, but it's really good to understand, you know, what people do and what their career path is. And I think it's very important to just reach out to people in a field and just ask them about their job. Ask for 15 minutes, hear about what they did, hear about their career. Um, Myself included, I love to talk about myself and what I do. It might be boring to most people, but showing interest and coming to a conversation prepared without any expectations. So, you know, don't ask them for a job, but more of just learning about them, learning how they got there, learning some of the challenges, learning about what's going on in the industry. You know, people will talk your ear off. And I think that's, you know, that's what that resource is there for. And I know personally, I'm more than happy to spend time with students and talking about that. And a lot of my colleagues are as well. So I guess, I mean, my biggest advice is don't be afraid to ask. And if you do ask, come, you know, prepared.
And I think just to piggyback on that, is that, you know, when you're on LinkedIn, because I agree, Greg, that's such a perfect place to start. Just with our UD community is so close knit that, you know, people, I would be shocked if, you know, you reached out to somebody that was in an alumni of UD and happens to be in an industry that you're interested in, and asking them to, you know, meet for, or have a phone call, or meet for a cup of coffee, or even a virtual meeting. You know, you're going to get a lot more yeses than no. So don't be afraid to reach out, like Greg said, but at least start with that. See all the connections of people that maybe were alumni with Dayton, and then you can kind of extract it from there to find out what industry that you want to learn more about, and then reach out from that point.
Yeah, and to take that one step further, even if you see an internship, for example, on LinkedIn, you want to apply to, once you're in there going to apply for it, you can see if there are other UD alumni that work at that company. So again, go ahead, shoot that person a message, and, you know, set up a conversation or whatnot. You can learn from them if even the internship program is still running at the time, or, you know, what have you. So, and I'd say another thing would be associations. There's a lot of associations out there. So a good Google search of associations related to public relations, for example, would be another good way to get in with groups like that to network too.
Great advice. Thank you. We're getting a few questions in the chat, and I'm going to get to those in 1 second. One question that I've been thinking a lot about: the pandemic has really caused a recession and interrupted normal labor patterns throughout the country. Could you, from your perspective, all working in human resources and recruiting, talk about the state of the labor market in Chicago right now, especially as it has to pertain to coming out of this pandemic?
I could jump in from an internal side on what we're seeing. I'm not so much about recruiting, but I know that location isn't as important as it was before. Specifically, I think we're learning a lot of jobs that we thought people had to be in the office for 100% of the time are just as productive, if not more productive, at home. You know, I think from Gallagher, we're a global organization and we have hundreds of offices. We're actually reducing our corporate footprint because we learned, you know, that teleworking is just as effective and even more cost effective. So I think, you know, there's one thing to consider, that with the pandemic, you know, let me take this a step back. When I wanted to move to Chicago, I knew I had to have a Chicago address for somebody to look at my resume. I don't think that's necessarily applicable anymore. I think knowing what job and what field you're in, there's always the opportunity. I think when you start out, it's probably better to be in an office because you can learn through a little bit more osmosis, but I don't think it's as stringent as a requirement as it used to be.
Angela, any thoughts on the market right now in Chicago?
Yeah, I think it's also identifying, who you are as a person. Like, you might be the type of person that thrives and gets energy from being around people. And so that's something to consider as well. Like Greg said, there are so many careers, as we're finding, that can be done remotely, and many people that is the better fit. But you have to be true to yourself as well, and know that maybe that is the better option for you, to be in a remote location, but it's not for everybody. And some people, culture is such an important part of your professional experience. And they say people join people, not necessarily businesses. And so that's something to keep in mind too when you're interviewing. The culture is important, and I know it's so much more of a challenge because it is virtual, to kind of get that feel of challenge or feel of culture. But I think that's an important question to ask when you're interviewing, not be afraid to interview them as well.
It's very true.
And I would say, just don't get, obviously there's a lot going on, but don't get completely discouraged. There are plenty of companies hiring right now, and they're hiring because they do need people. So there's, I think, a lot of opportunity, probably more so starting out in this year than last. But I think that we've turned the corner a little bit.
So I'm going to begin going through some of the student questions, and please keep them coming through the chat. These are really good questions, in fact. And I'm going to direct this first question, kind of reversing the order, to Kristen. Everyone tells me that you have to pay your dues, but should you really take a lower level job if you think your qualifications deserve more?
I would say yes, because you have to start somewhere. I know when I graduated, I had a job. My first job was, one of the tasks was filing contracts, and I was admittedly like, why am I doing this? I have a college education, I just graduated. But that work ethic that you establish in the beginning is what's going to take you to that next step, whether it's a promotion or that next step in your career or whatnot. But I'd say yes, you have to take that first job to kind of use that as a stepping stone, and do everything with a smile, I would say. People love the someone that's a go-getter, and that takes initiative. So yes, that would be my answer.
Very good. And I would agree, by the way. Question for Greg. So Greg, you talked about using LinkedIn in terms of networking with a focus on Chicago. How does one keep connected after making the initial first degree connection through LinkedIn?
That's a very great question. I think it depends. If I've had people I've connected with that have sent me, like a research paper that they found that they thought I might find interesting.
My dad left.
Or following up, and if there's any questions you have regarding the industry or news or something, I think following up with questions and something that's meaningful will keep it going. I don't think there's necessarily an expectation that you have to constantly maintain any kind of connection. And on the adverse, you don't want to be over communicative to people you don't really know. You do want to be respectful of their time. So I think there's not a perfect science to it. I think it's just, if there's something relevant, if you've made a connection with somebody and you see a position at their company that you're interested in, that's definitely certainly a good opportunity to reach out and just say, hey, I saw this was open. It sounds interesting. I remember what you're saying about your experience at the company. Do you know anything about it? Is there anyone you could put me in touch with that might be able to tell me more? Just you know, simple things like that. Just be direct, you know, be respectful of people's times, and, you know, whatever I guess makes sense in the situation. Wish I could give you a more direct answer.
That's really good advice, Greg. And I talk about there being a balance between never following up and having that connection grow cold, and every day, which is far too often, and you could be accused of stalking someone. So you have to find that balance. And I'm not sure what the right number of days is, but in some ways, it's a gut feeling you'll get through more and more networking.
Yeah, I mean, we get stalked by salespeople all the time through LinkedIn. So I think the more softer touch you can put to it, and the more, you know, casual relationship you can put to it, and just be direct with what you want, the more likely you'll get a response.
I have a question from a finance major for Angela. Are internships and jobs staying virtual, or are they having a virtual option for those who are interested in working in Chicago? And I think this might be somewhat related to your company, but in general, in the business finance landscape. I think you're still on mute.
I apologize. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay.
I think, you know, in our industry, it is such a personal thing when you're helping people with their financial future, right? So traditionally, it has been face-to-face meetings with clients, and we have pivoted in this environment and been more virtual. And, you know, we're finding that there are some pluses to that we didn't even expect. Like, you know, we're able to maybe see more clients in a day than we would have been before, because we're not driving to all over town in Chicago. So we're setting up and we're being more efficient with our time. Ultimately, I wouldn't want it to be like this forever, because I think, you know, that interpersonal or that human connection is so critical, at least in our business. And I think it also depends on what part of finance that you get into. Like if you're more on the analytical side, then, you know, working virtually might not be such a bad option, because you don't have that much interaction with clients or people like that. But if you're in finance where you have a lot of client interaction, then, you know, then that's something that, you know, hopefully we've already seen, because we're deemed an essential business, that we've been open, but it just really depends on the client. And, you know, if they're comfortable meeting, if you're comfortable meeting with them in person, then those meetings are happening. But virtual, we've found, has been really effective as well. Did that answer your question?
The person who asked can put it in the chat, but I think it did based on my reading of the question.
Okay.
Thank you. Question for Kristen. What is the best way for a student to begin a conversation with the University of Dayton alum, and how do you prefer to be approached by a current student?
So back to, you know, kind of what we were saying before, LinkedIn. I would say just go ahead and send them a message directly. You know, just introduce yourself, say that you're graduating in, you know, the spring, you're looking to get into XYZ, and hopefully that person will get back to you, and, you know, even offer up that, seeing if they'd be available, you know, for 15 minutes to chat or pick their brain about, you know, getting into the job market or what have you. So I think that sending a message on LinkedIn would be the best first approach. What was the second part of that question, or did I answer it?
I think, well, I asked you kind of as a follow-up, how do you like to be approached by a current student?
Yeah.
And maybe the answer is LinkedIn.
Yeah, I get a lot of LinkedIn messages, or sometimes they find me directly on, they've got my company email, so they just find me directly too, which is fine. So either way is great. And of course, I'm going to respond to a Dayton flyer.
And we find that to be the case, that there's such a strong community of flyers helping flyers. And one resource that Anita Brothers did promote in the chat is Flyer Connection. And while I am, I would argue, one of the campus's biggest proponents of being in LinkedIn, Flyer Connection is a great way for you to network with alumni that have raised their hands to say, yes, I would like to interact and help current University of Dayton students. So If you've not yet checked out Flyer Connection, I strongly recommend that you do, and you can find more information and the link to Flyer Connection in the chat this evening. A question that any of you are welcome to address. I am a non-business major. What advice do you have for me for looking for a summer internship this current year in Chicago?
I would say start looking now. I know that bigger internship programs are actively recruiting. But yeah, I'd start networking, find companies that you like and start reaching out to people. I think unless there's a well-developed internship program, it's people probably won't know until like second quarter. So I think, start making those connections and start doing your research on where you would like the internship and what you would like to do.
Yeah, I would say if you're a non-business major, that's not a big deal at all. So there's plenty of internships out there that require, maybe, communications degree or what have you. So I would not worry about that.
Yeah, I agree. Just find out what you want to do, like Greg said, and then just start applying, but do it as soon as possible, because everybody's recruiting right now for the summer.
Yeah, I would echo that urgency. If you're looking for this summer, today is the day to make things happen and to begin to apply. Look at company websites, look at Handshake, and take those positive steps. Question, I'll begin with this one with Greg. If a University of Dayton alum is very high up in an organization and you're going to apply for an entry-level job with that company, is it appropriate to reach out to her or to him on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. I think it's always appropriate to reach out to someone and make the connection and build a network. I think where the lines get crossed or is maybe if you come in with the intention of like trying to weigh the scales. I certainly think that you go in, you build a connection, you ask about their company. If I would even just say, hey, I'm applying for an internship. I'm curious of what your experience is at the company. If it's something that, I want to know if it's going to be a good fit. So it's, again, I think it was Angela or Kristen said it was interviewing them. I mean, you can even take that approach to it. But yeah, I think it's just, sort of hammering what I said before. It's always okay to make the connection, just have the right intention behind it and, be mindful and respectful of their time. Don't assume that because you're, alumni that you're going to, tip the scale. So
I think it's actually more to your advantage to reach out to someone that's higher level at the company, as they'll definitely be able to get if they're not, hiring for that role that you're interested in or that internship, they'll be able to point you in the right direction. We've got a lot of students currently that reaches out to our chief human resources officer, and she sends resumes to us directly. So regardless, your resume, your information will get into the right hands. So I think that's a really good idea.
It shows initiative. It shows, that you're taking the responsibility, that you have confidence in yourself, that you can reach out to them. So go for it.
I'm going to stick with Angela for the first part of this question. Do you have any advice for people who are struggling and really trying to adapt to online virtual interviews?
It is a challenge. So whoever, it's something that takes practice. I know on Zoom, you can kind of record yourself like in an actual meeting. So if you had a friend that, practice with them, practice doing a mock interview and then looking at yourself, playing it back to see how you did and how you would change things, I think really helps. Having eye contact, looking into the camera is really important, because if you were in person, that's what you would be doing. Make sure that they, see your personality as much as they can through. I think sometimes with the camera, we tend to freeze because it just seems so unnatural. But if you can kind of just take a step back and just think, you know what, they're doing this, I'm doing this, you know, I've got nothing to be afraid about. I'm proud of who I am and what I have to offer, and just kind of tell yourself that. And, you know, when you're talking, just try to be yourself as much as you can through the video. It's so important, and I know it's a challenge, but I can't stress it enough that that's what they need to like be able to feel you and to see you, but through the camera, who you are, like the essence of you.
Great advice. Thank you.
And I just want to add real quick that I know virtual interviews seem to be a bit more relaxed or casual, but I've had many senior level people at where I work say how impressed they were when people actually show up in a suit still to their interview. So don't forget to still dress to impress, so to speak.
Great point.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, I think I would agree with all the points made. And I think the unspoken one is just treat it like an in-person interview. So minimize distractions where possible. People understand it is a pandemic, so, you know, kids may be running in and out, but, you know, treat it with as much priority and dedicate time. And I think even dressing in a suit helps get you in the mindset, or, you know, business professional helps kind of set the tone.
Last semester, we did a full 1-hour workshop on this topic with some of our alumni leaders from Cleveland, Ohio, and our students could check out that video on the University of Dayton's YouTube channel if you want a full hour deep dive into that topic. A question for any of our panelists. How important is an internship as a first-year student? So a question from one of the freshmen in the room this evening.
I personally don't think it's as important your freshman year to have an internship. I think that's a year that, you know, you're getting acclimated to living on your own, going to school, making friends. There's so much more to just your college experience than that. I know it's really important, but for our particular business, I know we really focus on juniors and seniors for internships. So I would say, especially your freshman year, I wouldn't be so worried about it, because I think it's important to just kind of get acclimated to your, you know, your new school and you know, the environment around you, and, you know, your academics, that's first and foremost. And then, you know, maybe sophomore year, you could start looking into it, but definitely I wouldn't worry about it your freshman year.
Yeah, my perspective, just briefly, is try to make the summer count in terms of having something meaningful to put on your resume, so that when you go and speak to someone like Angela, when you're a sophomore or a junior, you have something to build upon. I love this question, and clearly the person asking is someone from the Chicagoland area. What are the pros and cons of working in the city of Chicago? And I think implied in this question is city versus more of an outlying area or a suburb.
As somebody who lived in the city and had to commute to the suburb for many years, awful. Like, the traffic is just horrendous. And I think it's dependent. Like, I'm going to just take a stab that if you're out of college, you're probably going to want to be in the city just because there's a better social life. And I mean, the public transportation in Chicago is fantastic. You know, it's something great to take advantage of. You know, there's great walkability in the downtown area. So I think it's you know, living and working in downtown is an experience in itself. Suburbs are great too. There's a lot of great, you know, big companies out there, but, you know, just know that commute can and will be a big part of your day. You know, I lived in the city, worked out in a western suburb, and spent about 2.5, 3 hours a day in the car 5 days a week, and that adds up very quickly. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Greg. I was doing the city to the North Shore, and on the weekend when there's no traffic, it took, you know, 20 minutes, but whole different story during the week. So you know, if you are in the suburbs commuting to the city, let's say, and you live by the train, the metro is great. But yeah, I do not recommend doing a drive, even though if it's your dream job, then go for it. But that's what eventually led me out of one of my past roles, was the commute.
So one of my colleagues from our office has joined us this evening and has a question that I think would be relevant to a lot of the students. So this colleague, who's a career advisor in our office, has worked, well, the question, I guess, is for one of his students. If someone has networked with an alum at a company, should that student mention the alum in a cover letter when applying or during the interview process? So I think in general, this topic is about referencing networking or name dropping, so to speak, during cover letter writing and interviewing.
I would say if you're comfortable enough for that person to vouch for you, and you have that familiarity, then I would say, in my opinion, I would say it's okay. But if it was something where maybe we spoke once and you dropped my name and I would have to look back, yeah, I think it just depends on your comfort level. And my threshold is if they could speak to you and vouch for you without you there, then I'd say it's safe to name drop.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Kristen.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think if you just ask for their permission as well, like, you know, I'm considering applying for this job, would it be okay if I referenced your name either verbally or, you know, in a cover letter? And, you know, that way it's kind of covered. They'll either tell you yes or no, depending on your relationship, like Greg mentioned.
I was just going to echo what they both said. So.
Great advice. Thank you. So we've had a couple of questions about graduate school, and I don't necessarily know your perspectives on graduate school, so this question is open to really anyone. Do you have any advice for a student going into the legal field in Chicago for an undergraduate internship? And she adds that she's struggling because many of the opportunities require someone who is already in law school.
That again?
So the question is an undergrad who would like to intern with a law firm in Chicago, but she's struggling because many of the law firms are looking for current law students.
Mm.
So I guess is it more around advice on how to do that, or like the importance of doing it when you're not in grad school?
I think it's more of the how-to. How do you make an impression with a law firm when you're an undergrad?
Not really working in legal. My guess, I think it would be similar to any field, is just show professionalism, show that you ultimately want to learn and make their lives a little bit easier. I think the challenge is when you're in grad school, it's specifically in that field, you're for lack of a better word, cheap labor. You know, doing legal work and paralegal work for, you know, internship kind of money. So I think, you know, showing initiative and willingness to learn and I don't know, persistence, I'd say go for it. I imagine it's probably very tough. So yeah, that's about as good as advice as I can get. Good luck. You know, I think it's definitely an opportunity. I think there's probably room. But yeah, I think just show a passion and willingness to I think what Kristen said earlier is, I guess, earn your keep and prove yourself.
And law firms do hire students for regular employment, be that as a legal researcher, a clerk, and maybe that experience could really help your resume when you're getting ready to apply for law school, if that's your future route.
Yeah, sometimes you need to, you know, take maybe a job that's not necessarily what you're looking for in order for you to get to the next step. You can always move around in the firm or whatnot. So, so that could be another avenue.
So a question for our three panelists once again. I am graduating this semester and am seeking employment in Chicago. should I be looking for internships or focusing strictly on full-time jobs?
I would say either. I know when I graduated, there was an internship in the field that I was pretty passionate about at the time, so I went for it. But if you've had an opportunity to do either, then I mean, I would say go for it. It doesn't matter, whichever one you want to do.
Yeah,
And
because
sometimes the internship, if you were to get an internship, again, that can build on your resume to get to that full-time job.
especially if it's like an internship that maybe you're not sure about, if you want to get into that industry, like what Kristen, what you're saying, because then there's really no commitment. It's usually there's a, you know, beginning and an end time.
Yeah.
So that could be helpful too, going that route.
Yeah, so basically you don't necessarily have to have an internship to get, you know, a full-time role.
So our students are asking great questions and they're building up in the chat. So I'm going to try to do some rapid fire where I direct a question to one of our alumni panelists, and we try to get through a number of these here in the next 13 or so minutes. So I'm going to begin with this question with Greg. Greg, applying for work in Chicago is very competitive. What to you makes a resume stand out when there are hundreds of applicants applying for the same entry-level job?
Great question. You know, I think if there is a network and there's a sort of a warm opening to it, I think that helps. I think just having a very crisp and minimal errors on the resume, I think will help. But I don't think there's anything particular that makes it stand out. Everybody, and I think this is the thing that I had to learn, is everybody has a different preference when it comes to how they like resumes. Some people like career statements, some people don't. You know, I think just do what, I don't have a solid answer. Everybody has their preferences. I like a good career statement to where I can just look to tell me what you're looking for and what's about you. But I think the most important thing is to just proofread, make sure there's not errors or misspellings or poor grammar, and that it is professional, because there's nothing that'll make you look away other than something that's, you know, very off base or misformatted or something.
And I would say, you know, of course, put on any clubs you're in, on, you know, sports, on whatever it may be, because I know we had a high-level hiring manager the other day saying that she liked to see that because it showed some proactiveness and whatnot. So I'd say don't forget to list those different extracurriculars that you're doing at school.
Both sets of great advice, and as a reminder and a plug for career services, if you are looking for resume help, we have a great Zoom drop-in hours program every day from 12:15 to 3 p.m. You can find that link to the Zoom room on the Career Services webpage. And once again, that is offered first come, first serve every weekday from 12:15 to 3 p.m. A great time to get feedback and to stand out when looking at a resume. A question for Angela, and she addressed this briefly in terms of her company earlier, but do companies in Chicago tend to take upper class students versus younger students when hiring for summer internships?
I think, I mean, that is something that we do focus on, our particular company. But I think there's many companies out there that will take any, you know, student, no matter what grade that they're in or what level. So it just depends. But in me in particular, we do look for upperclassmen. But there have been exceptions when students have applied and they've been exceptional, that we've made exceptions then, because they're just standouts, and you know, they show that they are mentally, you know, at a level or mature at a level to do the particular, you know, task or job that we're asking them to do. And just depends on that space, really.
Great, thank you. And my philosophy, if you don't try, you'll never know. So if you are a first-year student or a sophomore applying, it never hurts to try and to get your name out there and to network.
I had an example, actually a University of Dayton student reached out to me. Again, she knew I went there, and I knew her just from like the town that we lived in, but I loved that, number one, that she reached out to me. That showed, I loved that she took that initiative. And two, she had said that she had interviewed at a place, but because she was a sophomore, she wasn't sure if that closed all the doors. And so, of course, what did I do? Then I reached out, like Kristen was saying, that I reached out to our hiring person at our other office to say, are we accepting any sophomores? Because I have someone really sharp that I know, her background and so forth and so on. So don't be afraid. Like Jason's saying, the worst someone could say is no. Great. And you can handle that.
Okay, and keeping with our speed round theme, the next question is for Kristen. How do you go about trying to find a company that would be interested in helping to pay for your tuition for a master's degree? At what point is it acceptable to ask that question during the interview process?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's really no way to find that out until you are interviewing, I would say. And then I would only ask that question if you are working directly with a recruiter or somebody in HR. I would not ask, somebody else on the team that. So that's definitely okay to ask someone like myself, recruiting for the position, to go ahead and ask that. Anything along the lines of whatever it may be, pay, travel, which obviously we're not doing now, but so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, great, thank you. Question for Greg. What is the best networking LinkedIn direct message or email that you have gotten that makes a candidate stand out to you other than them simply being a University of Dayton student or alum?
So I don't get a lot of candidates because I'm on the internal side of talent. I did when I do post roles that I'm hiring for personally. I think it just short, to the point, professional, but like not too boilerplate. I mean, just I think when you're reaching out to people, they're just people, right? It's just as you would talk to somebody just in the street as, hey, saw this position, applied on the website, thought it was a great fit, wanted to reach out to you and just express my interest in this. And this is why I think it'd be a great fit for it. Not sure if you're the person I need to talk to about it, but I'm really interested in this role and learning more, and would love to tell you why I think I'm a good fit. I mean, just something simple of showing confidence, what you're looking for. And I think Angela just said it. I mean, the worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no, or they're not going to respond. So I think you owe it to yourself to reach out and take that extra message and know that they may be getting a lot of messages, and some people don't check LinkedIn as much as other people. So, I think you got to try, and I firmly believe that you could try to do as many touches as possible if there's a position. So, yeah. Angela and Kristen might be able to provide a little bit better perspective on this, being external, but that's just, my experience as a hiring manager.
Yeah, I would say the only other thing would be, look back at the person's profile and see what else, how else you can tailor the message and make it more personal. Maybe say that you were impressed by something they did at their current job or their past job, and you'd love to learn more about that. Or I would go that route and trying to make it a bit more personal instead of just more of a generic blanket message.
So a question for all three of you. We've received a number of questions in the chat about what is the best way for someone in this meeting to get a hold of you. What is your preference in terms of people from this evening in terms of reaching out?
I love email. I'd be happy to share my email with anybody, or LinkedIn. So either one.
Yeah, I'd say,
Hesitate.
sorry, Angela. Yeah, I'd say email is best for me. LinkedIn's fine too, but sometimes there's a lot going on LinkedIn. So I'd say email is probably the best.
Either or for me. I prefer LinkedIn, so I could keep that stuff separate from my personal email, but yeah, I'm always happy to connect. It may not be right away, but I'm always happy to connect.
Great, thank you. Question for Angela. What makes for a strong LinkedIn headline? Something that would help me as a student stand out?
Well, it's a really good question. Well, I think first and foremost, I think what recruiters look for is, are they something that you could say open to opportunities, something in the headline so that people know that you're actively looking. I think that would flag a lot of recruiters. Having a professional headshot, if you have that ability to do that, I would suggest that as well, especially with LinkedIn. I think you'll be taken more seriously if you have a professional headshot versus, just a casual headshot that might be like on some other type of social media. And you could even maybe make, open opportunities in the X, Y, and Z field, in the medical field or in the financial arena or something like that that can kind of catch the attention of a recruiter, I think would help.
Yeah, I would say definitely don't overthink it. Again, just tailor it to what you're looking for. But like Angela said, just open opportunities. I work with a lot of folks in public relations communications, open opportunities in PR and strategic communications. Great. So yeah, definitely wouldn't worry too much about that.
So I'm going to stick with you, Kristen, and I know we're down to about 7 minutes, so we're trying to fit as many questions in, and I'm going to stop in a couple of minutes to give each of our panelists the time to answer one final question that I love that one of our students contributed. The job hunt can be overwhelming. How do you deal with that feeling of stress when you are in the job hunt?
Oh man. I don't know. I always tell myself, like, sometimes you got to take a step back, and know that the right opportunity is out there for you. And yes, interviewing is it's a process, and it's definitely stressful. But I always told myself every interview I went through was a learning experience. So just look at it that way. That you are learning as you're going through all of this, and eventually it will lead you to that great next step. So yes, it's a lot, but I promise once you land that job or that internship, it'll be great.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that even if they don't hire you now, doesn't mean that they won't hire you down the road. I was in the final rounds for an interview years ago, and I didn't get it, and then they called me like a year later and said that they regretted that decision if I was still willing to come back over. And at that point, I was already in a job that I really enjoyed. So, it's important to maintain those networks, and a great first impression and a great impression of that doesn't necessarily mean it's the end if you don't get the job right away.
Treat interviewing like as if it's a job, and it is stressful. I mean, everybody would agree with that. It's not particularly fun, but the more you keep doing it and the more practice you get, you're going to get better at interviewing, and it's just going to make you better, like Kristen said. So try to have as many as you can. I know it can feel overwhelming, but it's just going to make you better. I promise you.
So we are down to about 4 minutes, and I have one final question that was asked by one of our students that I want to be sure to wrap up within this hour time frame. What is the best piece of advice you received when you were a graduating senior?
We're doing round robin, being open to any opportunity because I didn't know what I was going to do. I remember thinking, like, I didn't even know what job titles, what they meant or what I was going to do. And I remember my father just saying, be open to opportunities and network with people. And that was the best advice because it will lead you to doors that you never even imagined. And they could be better fits than you even dreamed of.
Yeah.
I agree. I would say don't be afraid. Take that phone call. You never know where that can lead. So yeah, just be very open-minded and yeah, I agree with Angela there.
Yeah, and I think the only thing to add is part of this experience is finding out what you don't like as much as what you do like. So it's okay. I mean, just don't put yourself in a situation where it's negatively affecting your your health if you're in that kind of job. But specifically, coming out of college or doing internships, it's just kind of getting into the corporate world for business majors and mostly around that, and kind of just testing the waters.
Well, I want to offer such a sincere round of applause and thanks to Angela, to Greg, and to Kristen. The advice you've given our students has been incredibly valuable, and thank you for giving us an hour of your time during a very busy week. And your support of the university means so much to me and to the entire university. So thank you for your time. To our students and alumni, we could not get to all of the questions, unfortunately, and some of them were relevant to certain areas like Handshake or career services. I put my email address in the chat, and if you'd like to follow up with me afterwards, I would be happy to do that. And I'm also happy to follow up in regards to any contact questions regarding our speakers. Once again, to Kristen, to Greg, to Angela, thank you so much for your time and your insights. And to all of our students this evening, thank you for attending this evening's Aviate workshop.